Hello and welcome back to Tutoring with Gavin. In this video tutorial, I'll be analysing the poem London by William Blake, written in 1792, which is part of the Anthology for both the AQA and Edexcel Literature GCSE. The poem was written at a time of huge changes in Europe, a few years after the American Revolution, at the height of the French Revolution, and during the Industrial Revolution and subsequent expansion of the British Empire. The poem describes a walk through London, which is presented as a city that is suffering from oppression and poverty. The persona of the poem sees and hears only misery and pain, which is, in part, a result of the effects of Industrial Revolution. However, this poem mainly addresses the lack of humanity, love, happiness, freedom and spirituality at a time when only a few miles away the French were introducing the guillotine to rid themselves of the ruling elite that had caused similar suffering on their people. This is therefore a radical and thought-provoking poem that would have stirred its audience whether they were the oppressed or the oppressor. This was a time when children were often sold or forced into dangerous work that deprived them of a childhood and education. Women were seen as second-class citizens with no respect, power or independence, often suffering violence at the hands of men. Life expectancy at that time was between 30 and 40 years due to poverty, inhumane housing, disease and poor nutrition. The River Thames at that point was filthy and smelly, often containing dead animals or bodies. Blake was considered a romantic poet. The Romantics wrote about the interaction between humans and their environment. The movement coincided with the Industrial Revolution and saw the restructuring of society, causing people to lose sight of what it really meant to be human. This poem is a critique on urban life at the end of the 18th century and suggests that freedom and happiness are not possible in this environment, that human beings were never meant to live like this. It's unnatural. Blake believed that people enter this world with every opportunity for happiness and love, but the adult world inevitably corrupts and crushes this innocent state. The poem explores a variety of injustices and dangers facing the city's inhabitants. Blake provides us with a collection of characters that are seen and heard by the poem's persona: chimney sweepers, soldiers, children born into poverty, and prostitutes. People are forced to risk their bodies in order to survive. The prostitutes bring children into the world, offering them little hope of happiness. This creates a cycle of misery. Children are exploited for labour, and soldiers suffer for the unnecessary wars designed to expand an empire formed out of greed and the oppression of others. The thoughts, pressures and ideals of society are under scrutiny here. He attacks several institutions, including church, empire and monarchy. The children who were chimney sweeps were often orphan children, and the church should have taken care of them. This explains why the poet links the chimney sweepers with the blackening church. The connotations of the word blackening suggests a tarnished, shameful institution. Blake criticises society, pointing out the misfortunes of the poor and the hypocrisy of the church, but he also criticises the government and monarchy of the time by suggesting that hapless soldiers sigh because they are the poor victims of a corrupt, imperialist regime which was cruel and inhumane, devised to make those in power more powerful and the rich richer by taking from those nations that could not defend themselves against the industrialised army of Great Britain. The adjective hapless suggests that the soldiers suffer because they are misfortunate enough to be born poor and have few options in the workplace. The sibilance of soldiers' sigh emphasises the sadness and unhappiness of these men. Blake reveals his feelings about war by describing the blood that runs down palace walls. The link between the blood and the monarchy points the finger at King George III. It is implied here that the soldiers suffer so that the king can maintain his affluent lifestyle. The object of the harlot's cursing is a crying newborn baby. While the prostitute is clearly a victim of poverty, her cruel behaviour towards the baby seems so much worse because the reader knows that this child's life will be full of misery and neglect. This is the ultimate attack upon innocence. During his life, Blake admired the feminist Mary Wollstonecraft, who was married to William Godwin, one of the first followers of anarchism. Godwin wrote about the abolition of marriage in political justice and felt pressure to marry to protect his children from being social outcasts. Godwin's desire to overthrow all existing political, social and religious institutions are echoed in this poem. For example, Blake attacks the institution of marriage using the image of a marriage hearse to signify the death of this religious tradition. In his 1793 book, Visions of the Daughters of Albion, Blake condemned the cruel absurdity of enforced chastity and marriage without love and defended the right of women to complete self-fulfillment. Blake was also attracted to the revolutionary Thomas Paine, whose Rights of Man was a defence of the French Revolution on the basis that popular political revolution is permissible when a government does not safeguard the natural rights of its people. These two important figures both believed in a free and equal republic. The poem consists of 4 stanzas that recount the persona's walk by the River Thames. The alternating rhythm could symbolise the winding river, with a fairly regular metre to represent the steady flow. The poem starts like a sonnet, as if Blake is about to talk fondly of London, with its rhyming quatrains of AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF. But instead of a romantic rhyming couplet to finish, it continues to another quatrain full of dark imagery that suggests a hopelessness. The first stanza explores the sights around the city of London, while the following 3 focus more on the sounds the speaker can hear. The idea of listening to the sounds of London is toyed with in the 3rd stanza, which is actually acrostic, as it spells out the word here, with the first letter of the first word in every line. Some of the lines in London make use of the metrical pattern known as iambic tetrameter, which has 4 pairs of syllables, unstressed followed by stressed. This can be seen perfectly in the first 3 lines of the poem. But that changes in line 4 when the speaker is confronted with the people. The normal walking rhythm of the first lines is interrupted with some shorter lines of 7 syllables. These shorter lines disrupt the flow of the iambic tetrameter, which could reflect the fractured society of London and the jolting sounds of those suffering along the way. The freedom of the iambic rhythm is being restricted by these shorter lines, symbolising the restrictive nature of life at that time. Repetition is used with words like here and chartered and marks, which has the effect of pounding the reader with important images, creating a suffocating atmosphere which reflects London at that time. The metaphor of the mind-forged manacles is particularly powerful as it suggests a lack of freedom physically and mentally. The alliteration helps emphasise these 2 images of mind-forged and manacles, which are words you would expect to use in a blacksmith's, who forges iron into chains and manacles by hammering it into shape, and could symbolise how those in power pound the poor into a life of oppression. Further symbolism can be seen with the River Thames setting, which could represent the journey of life, with all its twists and turns, while the harlot's cursing could represent the lack of love and care in urban societies. Blake uses a variety of semantic fields to create imagery that reinforces the powerful themes of urban life, childhood and corruption. The words marks, manacles, curse, blights, woe and plagues are all associated with oppression or suffering, creating a melancholy tone and a feeling of despair. The repetition of chartered emphasises the dominance of business and law in the lives of everyday people, but also has the connotation of a rigid, mapped-out area that confines people and stops them from roaming free. The vulnerability of these characters is expressed in the words weakness and tear, while the youthful harlots and the newborn infants present innocence that has been destroyed by poverty. Well, I hope this has helped you in your revision. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe to the channel so that I can continue to make these free tutorials. Until next time.